den, já vás vítám na dnešním dni inspiračního fóra, ve kterém se budeme věnovat digitálním technologiím. Teď ráno začneme programem, který nazýváme Vnitřní svět. A já mám velkou radost, že můžeme u nás přivítat slovenského vizuálního umělce a hudebníka Andráse Cséfalvaye. Dobrý den. Který nám ve svém programu, který jsme nazvali Screenshoty z budoucnosti, bude vyprávět spekulovat o historii v obou směrech.
Hi, hello. What we will be talking today I will be talking about a big fairy tale. Stories that are inspired by the present, are lessons that we learn from the past, but that in fact look into the future. Some of what we see in the past will actually repeat in an interesting way, and I wanted to pinpoint in the age where there is so little certainty, 10 things that we can be almost certain about in the future. Almost all of it concerns death and extinction. And if you don't mind a spoiler, only for the last one, where I am hoping to, I already used the word, I'm hoping to inspire a tiny spark of hope. But mostly we will be talking about extinction, and a lot of it will be quite pessimistic. We will start from the farthest time frame and go slowly closer. These numbers are in years. So if I put up the first slide, there is a website. It's a wiki where there is actually a collection of certain future events, mostly astronomical, because some of these things can be predicted. And then there are some physical certain future events that we know about. One of the most interesting and also one of the last ones on this list is the half-time of a proton. As we know, a proton is a part of the nucleus, one of the basic building blocks of almost everything that we know. And even this proton, just as the nuclear materials, has a half-life, although it is not sure whether the half-life of the proton is longer than the life of the universe or not. So the universe might end before we actually reach a proton decay. But at some point, all matter will fall apart, and all energy will be dissipated, and it will be very calm. This is a model of a proton, and what is maybe important to say is that it is a model. And what even Richard Feynman, the physicist, said about models is that no model is right, except that some of them are a little bit useful. So we don't know anything about the world. We just have working theories. And this is our working theory of what we call protons. But it has not too much to do with reality. It is just a fairy tale we tell about the world. Now, there could be an objection whether there is a ranking of fairy tales. And if you don't mind, I will use again a bit of a mathematical example, because very often we think about the differentiating aspect of these fairy tales. How detailed they are, how good the good use of a word there is present in the given fairy tale. And the differentiation, we have integration. We often do not talk about how important for the fairy tales is the integrative aspect, how well we can integrate the given differentiation. And that is what makes quite a big difference between the fairy tales that we call science and the fairy tales that we call, let's say, conspiracy theories. Because even conspiracy theories can have very good differentiating aspects, but very often they have almost zero integrational aspects. They have no use in the way we already use other things. They do not work well with the other theories we use. They do not work well with the model of the proton we use. So unless someone switches the whole model over and brings something better, there is not much use. We could have a theory, for example, that, or a fairy tale that this glass takes care of everything in the world. It is very compact, but it has almost zero differentiation, because even if it explains everything, it is very hardly usable. So good theories is a combination of their and I'm using kind of the word theory and fairy tale as a synonym, even if they possibly are not. A good fairy tale is something that has a both integrative and differentiative aspects. And what I hope, that all the other fairy tales that will be now coming will have some use, even if some of them are kind of on the exotic side. Boltzmann brains. That is a construct by Boltzmann, but there has been a lot of talk about Boltzmann brains recently. This is a certain but not known when, and even that is certain to happen, but we do not know when. So it will possibly happen before the proton decay. And the idea is that from the quantum fluctuations, it is possible that for a second or even a shorter time, a pattern of matter will arise, which is the same of a human brain with all the memories. And the problem with this thought is that we actually cannot know whether my thoughts right now are real or a Boltzmann brain, because this theoretical construct of an instant brain which has a memory of everything that happened before is almost certain to arise from the statistics of quantum fluctuation in the time as the universe is existing. And this has been an interesting thing when we talk about AI, whether AI or any kind of intelligence is more probable to arise from construction or from random events. And it seems like that on the lifespan of the universe, it is more possible that intelligence arises randomly from matter than that is a concentrated effort. But we will come back to a lot of kinds of artificial intelligences. So this is also something that will certainly happen, but we don't know when or whether it actually already has happened. And now if we come down with the scale, this is just 7 billion years from now. The sun will first grow huge. In 5 billion years, it will become a red giant. It doesn't have enough mass to become a huge explosive supernova, and it will not become a black hole. It will just shrink into a small, it is called a white dwarf, but we're not here to talk about these kind of details. The interesting thing is that there is a time frame where we can say that almost everything that we know that is alive and thanks its life to the sun will suddenly have their god die before their eyes, or probably not before their eyes. The sun is very important for eyes. The first creatures had the kind of free-floating neurons in their bodies, and they were in the ocean. And the way eyes and brain formed is that the neurons were attracted to the sun, and they floated upward and created this duality in the body, which created the head, which created the direction which creatures flow. If we look at some other creatures which don't have eyes, they usually have a different kind of symmetry, don't have this kind of one direction movement, but for example have radial symmetries. So this God, for all of the uses it had, will suddenly become slowly dead. And even before that, not still quite far away, but in a lot closer time frame, only 1.5 billion years from now, the sun will grow so large already that all possible eukaryotic life on the planet Earth will die, which is also most of the life we touch and talk to and see and also imagine is part of this grand death. But now something more optimistic. 538 million years ago was an event called the Cambrian explosion. And this was actually a geologic event. There was a great extinction, which is again an opportunity for other creatures. And the great extinction brought about a new place for a new beginning. And this is the point where the very slowly evolving stagnant life suddenly had enough imagination and used this imagination into a huge birth of finding new ways. And it is called the explosion because there were so many new creatures and so many new paths taken in evolution. And we have a certain date for another of this explosion. We are now probably living the 6th mass extinction, and there is a probability that in 215 million years they will be nearing a 7th mass extinction, which will be followed by the rejoining of all continents. And as all the continents join, there will be a new Pangea, there will be a lot more oxygen, and possibly a new explosion of life. So if you imagine the road taken from some of these creatures to what we are today, I think the fantasy can go wild and just think about what will happen to our bodies. I just have one remark about the evolutionary burst. We very often imagine this the evolution in this kind of Darwinian terms. The idea that there is, I'm talking about the image on your right, on your left, that it is some kind of gradual competition between competing branches. Most of the new evolutions, there's also this Czech evolutionary biologist Fleger, but in the 80s, more famously, Gould and Aldrich are talking about something called punctuated equilibrium. The question arises, why are we not finding the intermediary fossils between these evolutionary branches? Why don't we find the in-between man and the in-between horse fossils, or trilobite trees. And while on one hand, it is also important to say that fossilization is extremely rare. Fossilization doesn't happen with every dying creature, but it happens under very rare conditions when the dying body is deposited in some kind of soft soil, and then it is also not crushed by some other geological layers. So it is it is an important cross-section for us because we have no other information. But if it was a crime scene, you could definitely not make a case for it. In punctuated equilibrium, we deal with this. We deal with the question whether the aim of evolution is some kind of competition, and I think it's almost a political answer that the aim of evolution is much more an attaining of equilibrium in each era, and then something happens, a volcano bursts, an asteroid comes down upon our head, and then we have to react, and evolution happens in super short times. And for a very long time, then the equilibrium is attained, and we live in, well, let's call it harmony, so I have some optimistic words too. So we live in harmony for a little time, or actually the longer time, and in these short time frames, there are these turbulent and perhaps even competitive eras. But and that is why, because of the rarity of fossilization, we actually do not find these intermediary fossils, because those happen in a very short time frame, possibly just generations and not hundreds or thousands of generations, which are the case of the Darwinian version. I think, so I am a visual artist, and this is one of the most recent topics which I am kind of researching, to what extent the language of capitalism influenced the language what we use for evolution. So also again, how we are creating the story of evolution was influenced by a rising middle class during Darwin's time. And I find it important that we now have much more advanced evolutionary theories. So perhaps we could try to reflect that back and use our political imagination to overthrow the old idea that competition is natural, because in fact this naturality was composed out of the idea of competition, which would be just an argument in circle. And now we're getting to closer time frames. Purgatorius, this is 50 million years in the future, which is not a particular and a definite date, but it is just interesting to talk about what happened 50 million years before, and to imagine what will happen in 50 million years. Purgatorius is the Latin name for this ancient rat. It is the common ancestor of all mammals that live today, and it is one of the animals that lived through the extinction when 66 million years ago this asteroid came to Earth. This visit caused the immediate death of a few thousand dinosaurs, which were unlucky to stand right under the asteroid. Most of the other dinosaurs lived for a couple of thousand years, but because of the huge amount of dust and ashes that covered the Earth, most of the life then went extinct in the coming 1,000 years. However, there were a few strategies of survival. Purgatorius, I'm not sure if the name really comes from that, but I believe it is the animal that survived the fire or purgatorium. But I don't know if that is true. This animal has a very strange reason to be, and also how mammals became humans. We sometimes think that we humans are the first who create an artificial intelligence, But I believe there is a reason to make and to tell a story when it was actually a conspiracy of the trees. The trees were, so a few 100 million years ago, the trees were not the ones with the leaves, only the pine tree kind. And they were sitting in a circle, and like a huge brachiosaurus was lying next to them, and it was kind of just snoozing. And they were thinking, there surely must be some way we can use this material that is accessible to us and to make it much more useful. What if we made some circumstances for this weird thing there to make it useful for us, to make it work for us? What if we transformed our own milieu and changed the way we work as trees and created a space so that they could fertilize us, and meanwhile they would think that it is they who are the agents. So the trees became the trees as we know it. They started to grow leaves. And even if you brought a triceratops here today, maybe not here, but somewhere next to the train station, and the train would go by, and the triceratops would say, "What a fantastic technology! This is amazing. I only remember pine trees, but now they have leaves." Like the biggest technological change that happened in the last 300 million years is probably that the trees created these perfect solar cells to much more effectively create their own energy, and also create these small nooks and shadows where those large brachiosaurs could think maybe we should pack our stuff smaller, and then we could hide and run around, and suddenly we have these rats, the first artificial intelligent automata, which is actually created by the trees in order to fertilize the trees better. And sometimes what happens with artificial intelligence is that it gets out of hand, and look what happened from this. Suddenly it became human, and then now we started to cut down trees, and the trees are thinking what we should do. But there is also optimism in this. There is also a bit of optimism in this, because if we look at humanity, humanity has huge power, but it is also not motivated enough to destroy the world. Somehow it is just incompetent enough to, and I would almost use some kind of mentally inapt, even with its own competence, to enact the real destruction. And I think what is stopping them is some kind of sadness, which is part of intelligence. That because we have a kind of depression, and I don't mean it in the mental illness, but in the kind of popular sense, a blue feeling that we do not destroy the world. And maybe this is my first optimistic message, that perhaps the intelligence we are trying to create will at one point turn against us. Some of us will be cut down, but hopefully intelligence inherently has to be sad. So they will also perhaps keep a few of us, just as a reminder that we also had the trees. And of course, we have to talk about where does human evolution lead in the 50 million years in the future. And there is this idea that it's called the Kardashev scale, where we're talking about human civilization or intelligence in space and their scale. And this Kardashev scale is talking about, so there is a scale of 1 to 4, I think, and number 1 is a civilization that uses all of the planet's resources, 2 uses all of the solar or the star system resources, 3 is all the galaxy, and 4 theoretically uses all of the energy resources of the universe for their own, the purpose of their own civilization. This is a rendition of of a Kardashev scale 2. No, yes, 2. It is a civilization that uses all of the energy of their star, and there is a special construction called the Dyson sphere. Although I think the whole star should be covered if we really want to say that it uses all of the energy. Well, I'm curious if at some point the human civilization will reach this level, but we could maybe pose it somewhere in the future. Although actually I think that the predictions for the Dyson sphere are even sooner than what I just drew. But I wanted to draw this distinction that with the Purgatorius, which lived 50 million years before, and what a journey humanity can take if we now think about this rat-human journey, and if we extrapolate this another 50 million years. Now I will be talking about a few of my personal projects, although I did a short work about Purgatorius, but I want to talk about the 6th mass extinction that we are living today. One of the possibilities is that we will slowly kill ourselves. The other possibility is that we will kill ourselves fast. This is 15 million years, and it is just my rough calculation when there will be already no signs of humanity. One of the words we very often use these days is the Anthropocene, and it is a very kind of self-indulging word, because we think that humanity will leave some kind of traces behind. And this is the time frame where probably all of the signs that we would leave behind are erased. So, for example, in the case of a huge nuclear war that would destroy us in 50 million years, so 4 million years is the half-life of uranium. So at this time, all of the uranium that would settle on Earth is already broken apart in these nuclear processes. So even if we could say, oh yes, a big nuclear war would at least have leave a trace, a warning sign, after 15 million years, even that disappears. And of course, I'm not talking about a lot of things which will be no more. Nations, companies, buildings, pyramids built on the sun, or at least on the moon. Pyramids built on the moon will also not exist in 50 million years. I did 2 depressing computer games. This is actually not mine, but the other one. Oh, okay. So sorry, that is coming. But first, I have to say about the 5th mass extinction. So I already talked about the 5th mass extinction when the dinosaurs, most of the dinosaurs died 66 million years ago. So we have these few fossils. Okay, we have a little bit. We have a little bit of a crime scene, but it is actually so irrepresentative what actually happened. So to my knowledge, what happened, I had this discussion with the Tyrannosaurus, although it's a ghost, but ghosts sometimes speak through the ages. And what I learned is that, in fact, so this kind of technological civilization is maybe a few thousand years old of human civilization. We could fit it so many times in the era of the 2 closest fossils we find. Let's say we find 2 Deinonychus skeletons 1 million years apart. They would be closest relatives to us, and there would be probably 2,000 times the human civilization fit between those very close relatives. there is really a possibility that intelligence rose many times in those times. And what I learned from this Tyrannosaurus is that actually what we think was a death by a meteorite was in fact the last few hundred years when the Tyrannosaurus dynasties really became enamored by the idea of these imperial nation states. And it ended in fact with a huge nuclear war of the Tyrannosaurids, which happened, which we even have some evidence for, and this is this meteor crater near the Yucatan Peninsula. But nobody really have found a fossil flag. It is extremely rare, and also all the nuclear minerals have already disappeared. So in fact, it is very hard to prove or disprove this message I got. I also met a few other ghosts. I did two researches. One is a paleontologic location called Sandberg near Bratislava, and the other is a quarry near Reporie, near Prague. And both of these researches I did are now computer games where you can walk and you meet ghosts of the past, and everybody is talking about their coping mechanisms with extinction. In the first video, which is called Ghosts, it is more about succumbing to the extinction. The second one in Prague is already a little bit, it has already some coping mechanisms, which is mourning and crying. So it is a bit more active, although still not very helpful. It is helpful, but not very hopeful. We will get to hope only later. So if I can ask, first I would like to play the video Ghosts, and the second video, both of them are kind of walkthroughs of the game. The first one is, I think, 7 minutes. The second is 4, for your information. So first Ghosts, then Trilobite. There will be some text, also maybe not completely easy to hear what will be there, so it is also a little bit about the mood. But I will just tell that both of these places are photogrammetrically recorded. I was flying a drone and getting these paleontologic locations recorded. Then they were remade in Unity as like a walking simulator.
Now, of course, the planet was warming. We could see that the end is coming. But with our small brains, there was really nothing we could do at that time. We could only discover part of what was happening. We could only see. We could only have access to part of all that is happening, and yet we could sense our own extinction. We knew we will be dying. What could we do? What could we do? We tried everything. We tried changing our own behavior. We tried changing the behavior of our own environment. We're trying to work out a solution that will work for most of us, yet on the other hand, moves with
I'm unsure what to do. strength to be alive, but it is an imprint of leaf and stone that make it rise to other slowly. Was Permian extinction. The volcano spouted so much ash. The atmosphere was covered. Nobody could see the light. Nobody could see these legends. And it was happening. Took ages. The seas became massive.
I am looking over the hill, breathing. I never change. I never change. I try to say the same. I sit over the ledge and look around. I feel calm. I feel the time passing, and I'm not afraid. I don't change. I stay the same. As I close and as I open, with my tongue, I taste this world. It changes, and I stay the same. I know with my death, nothing changes. I don't fight it.
Tuto druhou hru ještě si můžete stiahnuť.
You are
na
standing in a mine
a to
near
tvajú.
Prokopské údolí. The men have clawed away the stone. Layers upon layers of archive. The new creativity. The new surfaces. New kinds of greed have found their way. Trees leaking carbon out of the skies, algae, slimy poor souls, a petrified memory. The smell of death has been released. The world is changing. No stone remains the same. In our time, they be forgotten, their beauty, those animals, structures, what remains for us as we stand in front of the gates of destruction. We live some, but in pain, safe, but seeing others as they come for air. I am singing here, mourning, lest they be forgotten. Under the dark shadow, until you admit to yourself there is no other way. Humanity is too effective. I remain just singing, mourning, eating the dead. Remember the collecting death that looms. Human will drag us along. Remember death. Not the one where your breathing stops, or where you lie still, but all of that gravity that fights all of your levity to rise, fly away. Remember the collecting death that looms. Human will drag us along. They dug too deep and too greedily. They sequestered a pool of tears because some still dream of flying before a great blanket is pulled over. And at that point, only the sea remains. Teach yourself the road to the valley, to cry, to mourn, to remain brave.
We've already talked about the unmotivated general AI that will not that will have enough power to kill everybody, humanity, but will probably have not enough motivation. I think it is interesting to think about intelligence being born out of complexity and random fluctuations as the Boltzmann brains. It is possible that every form of matter which contains carbon contains some little elements of life that in the human brain becomes a critical mass and brings about intelligence. We can also think similarly about silicon and carbon are actually have almost the same structure. So if you could substitute a silicon atom in every organic molecule, perhaps we would get some kind of silicon-based life. But it is also possible that there is some form of life contained within each silicon atom, which if reaches a critical mass, will reach intelligence, and in a very different kind of way than the way we are constructing it. There is also this problem of computational models that we use. So all of our computational models are based on a kind of mathematics which was popular in the 30s. This discussion about the axiom of the excluded middle, so whether there are operations that can be just binary, or we should think about other kind of operations. And all of the calculation that we use today, except maybe quantum computing, is based on not using or using the axiom of the excluded middle, and that enables only certain kind of intelligences to arise. And it is quite possible that there is a computational aspect to consciousness, but in order to understand it, we really have to open up information theory. Maybe I'm using the wrong word, but information science, information science to using other models of computation, computability, and how perhaps there could be other ways of modeling consciousness or even attaining. And then I also presented this perhaps a little bit esoteric version whereby intelligence can actually just rise in a very different way, and perhaps it just needs a critical mass. Maybe if there is enough chips at a garbage dump, if there is a trillion tons of chips at one point, then maybe without even being assembled into a computer as we would imagine, it just rises out of some kind of sheer mass. This was a joke. But I believe we don't have to be afraid of a general AI, because it will be probably just intelligent enough to be unmotivated. Also, there is this quite famous Turing tests, that if you talk to a computer and you cannot distinguish it from a human, then it is an intelligent chatbot. Well, if any kind of non-human intelligence would be intelligence enough, then they wouldn't reveal themselves to human and constantly fail the Turing test. So any real intelligence will actually be undiscoverable to us, because why would they want to deal with humans anyway? There's another aspect which was mentioned by one of the trilobites, if you were listening carefully. So we sometimes also think, mass extinctions, but we are the first one who are consciously making decisions to go towards a mass extinction. Well, let me bring up one of the mass extinctions, which was actually caused by the algae, who discovered this wonderful technology, photosynthesis, and started to use it and adopt it massively. And no single algae is responsible for the mass extinction, but their collective effort of pumping out oxygen into the atmosphere brought about a huge climate change, a massive global cooling. And actually, this was the largest mass extinction, where 96% of all life died on Earth because of the simple efficiency of algae. Now, of course, okay, we can talk about whether the algae consciously made the decision to continue using this technology, the photosynthesis, even if they, or scientists already had information that it is probably warning the world, and the politics was a bit different. They were saying, okay, but we still have time, and we're making electric photosynthetic, I don't know, whatever. We are putting the O2 in safe spaces and blah, 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 and all the politics, which we unfortunately also have no recollection of, because any kind of plant organic technology doesn't really fossilize. I even haven't talked about the insect imperiums, but that is also something which we only have ghosts talking about it, but no real fossil evidence. So I just wanted to bring up this thing. I think it should be connected to more like some other year. This is maybe not well positioned, but the algae, or it sometimes is just simple efficiency, like not maleficent. It is just everybody doing what think is good for them and their family is doing good, brought about the mass extinction of almost all life on Earth. So maybe that is just life is designed. But then there is of course danger, and it is not coming from the unmotivated guy or the general AI, but narrow intelligent AI, and these narrow AIs are very, very nicely depicted in this book by Daniel Suarez called The Demon. I don't know if I can spoil it for you. Maybe I'll just say a few words and hopefully this image doesn't spoil everything for you. But the idea is that a computer game programmer dies and suddenly things start to happen in the world, and everything is done by an automated computer which is reading the news, and it activates its first program when it reads in the news that this person died, and there are many, many pre-planned scenarios, and everything is activated through a protocol which this person programmed, and in fact it is a completely, it is a crime which has no, which has just a machine which is making these crimes, and it was extremely hard to stop. In fact, it was impossible in this book. And this is in fact a very real possibility. We might be facing very soon programs which are autonomous, but not in their intelligent sense, but that they were programmed to do kind of autonomous differentiation between groups of population and so on. And this, it's not an extinction event, but on the other hand, it is very close. Okay, now, first and last thing I want to talk about, hope. Imprint of hope into the mammalian brain. So how is it that even if we know all of this, we still have some spark of hope in our brain, and why is it? Well, I have an answer for it, and you might either accept it or not. It happened during the extinction of the dinosaurs. There were two major strategies for the big-bodied animals to survive, and the really large-bodied animals didn't. No large-body animals survived, only the tiny ones. And the two big strategies is the mammals, which you already saw, the Purgatorius. This is another kind, that is the Tenrec. It's like a very, very similar branch of animals, and they lived through the extinction event because they buried themselves into the ground, and because of hibernation they could survive even hundreds of years. The other survival strategy was, and it started a bit earlier, so it wasn't necessarily a survival strategy, but it definitely helped, was the dromaeosaurs. One part of a dinosaur grew large feathers, which was first used for gliding and at this point already for flying. So some of the tiny birds could fly above the shroud of ashes, and that was the way how birds survive today, and they are the only surviving dinosaurs today. Only from a few hundred species. Now we have, well, there is more, in terms of numbers, there is more birds than mammals today. So in fact, it is still the rule of the dinosaurs if you count it that way. But in terms of mass, the mammals are heavier. So all the mammals in the world are heavier than all the birds. Now, what happens at this moment? So you will see the video shortly. It is a short 3-minute video, but I want to show you this cosmic Christ, which is imprinted in the head of each mammal, and it rises from the idea that the mammals, of course, are talking to each other, and yeah, we should leave, we should do something. This planet is really unlivable. What do we do at this point? And then they suddenly see that and they're thinking like, what the Jeff Bezos, or who are these rockets leaving? What is happening? And then, of course, I have to go back because suddenly one of these rockets stops near the mammal and he realizes these are actually the birds leaving the Earth. And as the birds leave, they burst through the shroud of ashes. And just for a second, this mammal can see through the ashes, and for a second they see the shine of the sun. And then these birds become like the ancient memory. Like the dragon becomes the ancient memory of hope in the mammalian brain. And we think dragons come from China, they found some fossils, and maybe that's the history, how it's usually interpreted. But I believe that in fact, dragons are a symbol of hope, not only because of human culture, but they are part of this as a symbol of hope, and flying also, as symbols of hope because of this moment which happened at the extinction, that it was imprinted very deeply, and we cannot do anything against this memory but hope. So it is like some cosmic Christ, although the name is random, but the idea that there is a creature that brings us the light. And now I would like to show you this last video, which is 3 minutes. But I already told everything that will be in it.
After the fire settled, came the ashes. The meteorite heat was with us for hours, but the ashes that covered the earth remained for hundreds of years. We could not see the sun, so we lived as exiles underground. We lived a low life, patiently waiting. But waiting for what? Those that could tried to leave Earth, but no one possessed the knowledge to pass the shroud of ashes. But then there were those creatures, the dinosaurs. I can still see that image brightly burned into my memory. A flying dragon rising. I do not know how, but they did it. Somehow they found the technology to rise, to overcome the dark shroud. And I don't know where exactly they went, but the day they rose to the sky, something changed. Something had taken hold deeply in my brain. The dragons broke the cloud covers, and after years we could see the rays of the sun. But the dragons brought us hope.
So of course, some of the dinosaurs which possessed the technology have probably went beyond the solar system and are now living somewhere else, but the others remained. I didn't put a date to this because my hope is that this thought inspires some hope if the others were a bit maybe depressing. So this is all. Thank you.